April 2023. This deck of playing cards sold at auction for $1,500. And while this was a little surprising to the collectors who pay attention to such things, it was nonetheless the new par for the course. After all, another deck by the same designer had recently sold for $1,300. Even so, the playing card collecting community witnessed an even more amazing sale roughly 2 weeks later than when this deck sold in a publicly discussed private sale for $2,000. So what do these $1,000 decks have going for them that makes people willing to pay so much for them? Let me explain. And better yet, let me show you. Welcome to the INRIS Files, presenting thoughts on culture, history, and the human condition from a very specific Generation X point of view. As I record this, it's the year 2023, and we are in the midst of a golden age of modern playing card production. A number of illustrators and designers, as well as manufacturers and producers, have been testing and pushing beyond the limits of playing card design and technology. The $1,000 decks I'm talking about today were all three produced by one such pioneer who works under the pseudonym Lotrek. Legend has it that Lotrek and his wife and creative partner, Melania, were both graduates of Athens School of Fine Arts in Greece, where they both studied painting. In 2012, Lotrek illustrated and designed the Timeless deck for RSVP Magic, and then the following year did the same for RSVP's Butterfly deck. These decks were manufactured by the United States Playing Card Company, makers of the well-known Bicycle and Bee-branded decks in the United States, and they were distributed nationwide through conventional Magic and gaming retail channels. But in the summer of 2013, Lotrek took control of his creative destiny and launched a deck entirely his own on the popular crowdfunding site Kickstarter. The Venexiana Playing Cards project was a custom illustrated and designed deck that depicted the elegance and joy of living in Venice's high society. The deck was both wonderfully illustrated and designed, and the drawings told tales of joy and intrigue. The project was a huge success on Kickstarter, and Lotrek's career as a playing card designer and producer was well on its way. Since 2013, Lotrek has created dozens of playing card projects, showcasing not only intricate and clever design, but also developing new techniques and technologies that have helped to shape the way modern playing cards are produced. He has been selected to contribute to several popular annual series of decks, and he has won multiple awards for his work. But what is it about the three decks I mentioned earlier that makes them particularly valuable amongst the playing card collecting community? In general, the value of a deck of cards is determined by the same three basic things that most collectibles are evaluated for: aesthetics, techniques, and context. First, how does it appeal to the eyes? This is the visual art, design and illustration, subject matter, theme, font, layout, and the bling factor. The use of metallic inks or embossing, for example. This also includes the genre or category. In the case of playing cards, for example, are they standard decks, transformation, or semi-transformation? Or perhaps they fit into the category of minimalist, custom, art, magic, players, game decks, military spotter decks, pinups, souvenir, or marked cards. Each of these categories have their own rules, and how well the art pleases within the confines of those rules is part of their aesthetic charm. Next, there's the technical art. Here we're considering manufacturing technique, innovations, printing, foiling methods, varnish, finish, paper. And for paper, we're interested in the thickness, weight, stiffness, and snappiness, the glue, and even the color. And the cut, traditional versus modern, which is all about which side the die is pressed down upon to make the card cut out from its surrounding material. All these factors come into consideration. And finally, there's the context. What is the reputation of the artist and the designer, who may or may not be the same person for a given deck? This is often down to branding. After all, in the world of art, many people can paint like Monet, but only Monet's work can be called a Monet. Context also includes the renown of the manufacturer. Several different card makers enjoy a variety of different reputations. Not all manufacturers are created equal. And companies like USPCC, Cartamundi, Elite, Legends, WJPC, Shuffled Ink, MPC, Jamaico, and Liberty are all just as likely to be evaluated for their quality and their attention to detail, as well as their country of origin, for example. There's the reputation of the producer, for example, David Blaine or Craig Ramsey, who are more involved in bringing the elements together than they are in the specific illustrations or manufacturing. And there are companies like Theory 11 and Illusionist. Context goes beyond just branding and reputation, however. The value of a deck also takes into account the quantity of the print run. Scarcity drives up price. And the interest in the subject matter. Take, for example, the Iraq's Most Wanted deck after the U.S. invasion of Iraq, or feel-good commercial decks like Coca-Cola, or intellectual property decks like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. Context can make a huge difference. You'll note that sometimes these categories can overlap. Elegant designs rendered in foil-only printing is both an artistic achievement as well as a technical one. A playing card deck featuring illustrations of the heroes and villains of a civil war may be appealing for aesthetic reasons, but also resonant because of the context of current political tensions. Nonetheless, these are the three general categories against which most art is judged, and that is certainly true for playing cards. Now let's take a look at these $1,000 decks. What makes them so special? Exhibit 1, the Golden Oath deck on blue, which recently sold for $1,300. Released in 2019, these decks were an experimental offshoot of the Golden Oath decks that were originally produced 2 years earlier. Lotrek was experimenting with a deck that was printed without ink, but rather foil only. This time he experimented with 3 different foils on the faces, gold, silver, and red. His illustrations are the well-known standard quartz reduced to the 3 colors and rendered in both bold and elegant design. Unlike the earlier Golden Oath decks, this new experiment involved a distinct blue paper that is stiff and resilient and features a unique sheen. While the Golden Oath decks themselves and their proof run decks had already commanded a high price on the market for their rarity, only 50 Golden Oaths on this rare blue stock were ever made available, making these decks a kind of white whale for any avid collector, not only for their beauty, unique printing method, and their unusual paper, but also for their scarcity. Oh, and the decks were never granted their own printed tuck case. Rather, they were distributed in clear custom carrot cases with magnets to latch the case closed and the serial number written on the case. Exhibit 2, Damask Blue, won at auction for $1,500. 1 year prior to that, in 2018, Lotrek announced his second of 3, so far, mystery decks, where enthusiasts could pre-order sight unseen a new deck under development. Or they could wait for Lotrek to reveal a few details about the deck, but pre-orders by then would be offered at a higher price. He ultimately took enough pre-orders to justify a total print run of 400 decks. The mystery deck in question was the Red Damask, inspired by the opulent flower pattern that has typically been associated with more elegant tastes. He later announced that in addition to these Red Damask decks, there would be an additional variant in blue with a print run of only 120 decks, and he would only sell 1 per customer and only to people who had already ordered the red version. Both decks feature remarkably intricate patterns rendered in 4 different colored foils, plus different colored inks on the faces, and both foiled backs and the fronts featured full bleed artwork, which means the patterns ran right to the edge of the cards. The tuck boxes are similarly adorned with multiple foils and inks, and the paper has a luxury feel. Within a year, collectors would put up a set of red and blue Damask decks for upwards of $350 for the set. As of this recording, the most recent auction for a blue Damask alone went to a $1,500 bid. The Damask decks boasted the most detailed foil printing on playing cards up until that time, making them both beautiful to the eye and a credit to painstaking and innovative manufacturing. This, combined with Lotrek's recognized name and the significantly small print run, has made these decks among the most sought after in the modern collecting era. Exhibit 3, the Imperial Reverse Icons deck, sold for $2,000. Like any field in the world of art, custom playing card producers are often laying claim to being the first at this or the first at that, accomplishing feats that have never been done before, when in fact they often have. The true innovators are often those who take an existing concept and push it beyond its perceived limits. After the success of Lotrek's first Venexiana deck, He followed up with the brilliantly illustrated Venexiana Dark decks and the innovative Venexiana Gold. Up until this point, modern playing card manufacturers would use hot-stamped foil on the solid-colored backs of playing card decks as advertising specialty items, intended to be given away at events to remind attendees of their time there, or more often to remind them of a specific product or service. The major playing card manufacturers that produce these ad specialty decks, like Jamaico, treated foiling on card backs as an inexpensive novelty for party favors and convention spiffs. Truth be told, when your humble correspondent here got married in the late 1990s, my bride and I had ordered these decks foiled in gold as customized wedding favors at each place setting at the reception. They cost us about $2 a deck. Granted, that was the wholesale price, but even the retail price would have been very affordable. The foiling process could not handle very thin details in the design, but as long as the fonts and the graphics were big enough, the message could still be read easily. To this day, I carry cards from a different batch of decks that I'd also ordered from Jamaico that feature my name, email address, and phone number on them to use as my calling card when I'm at any occasion where I may need to give out my contact information. All that said, Jamaico didn't offer much in the way of customizing the faces of the cards they printed. One of the ways they could keep the prices so low on their ad specialty cards was to start with mass-produced generic cards that could then be printed in smaller batches on the backs. The United States Playing Card Company was more friendly toward the idea of printing fully customized decks, both fronts and backs, but they didn't offer foiling of any kind when Lotrek was producing the follow-up to Venexiana. Neither did the less expensive manufacturers in China that were just starting to ramp up production, although, unknown to Lotrek, there was one such facility that was just starting to experiment with the idea. Another playing card innovator named Bill Kalush, based in New York City, was working with a company in China to produce high-quality playing cards with a small gold-foiled starburst in the middle of their card backs. This project was called Exquisite Bold. While Lotrek was unaware of that project and unaware of Jamaico's offerings, he nonetheless had set his sights on something much bolder than either. He wanted to reproduce the pattern of his Venexiana card backs in hot-stamped gold foil. This project became known as the Venexiana Gold decks. And Lotrek controlled the manufacturing process from beginning to end. He produced 201 decks, one for himself, and 200 numbered decks distributed to backers willing to pay $100 for each one. Oh, and backers were only allowed to buy a maximum of 2 each. I told you all that so I could tell you this. The Venexiana Gold deck opened the industry's eyes as to what could be accomplished with regard to foiled backs, and both designers and printers started exploring ways to incorporate foiling into their decks. Lotrek, in the meantime, was continuing to push forward. He wanted a process to foil cards in much greater detail, like he would later accomplish with Damask and other projects. But he also set his sights on using multiple foils in the same design. Up until this point, the common belief held that this simply couldn't be done. The process of hot stamping foil onto a card back would at the very least pull up any foiling laid down during a previous pass. Registration, which means getting the different printing passes to line up perfectly with each other, would be near impossible. Hot stamping would do too much damage to the card and cause the pattern to bleed through to the other side. We talked earlier about how Lotrek would eventually produce decks with 3 and even 4 different foils on the same card, and even foil both the fronts and the backs of the same deck. But first he would have to find out if it was even possible to print just 2 foils on a deck. Toward that end, he launched a Kickstarter campaign to bring the Icon's Imperial deck to life. The card faces would feature a newly designed set of court cards that looked like the religious icon paintings produced by the Orthodox Church in the days of Byzantium. And on the back, an intricate design of gold and silver foils, combining to show the powerful image of a regal bird of prey. He would produce 555 of these decks and sold them for roughly $80 apiece. However, he promised an enticing prize to anyone who would pledge to purchase a set of 4 decks. He waited until just before all the pledges would be collected before he revealed what his thank you would be to his avid, trusting backers. A free deck that was the same as the Icon's Imperial deck except wherever there was gold foil on the original, the gift deck would have silver, and wherever the original featured silver, the gift deck had gold. This was the Icon's Imperial Reverse Edition. He made 55 of these decks. 51 people pledged to buy 4 decks of the Imperial. The remaining 4 reverse decks were for Lotrek's private collection, never to be sold. The Icon's Imperial and its reverse counterpart are simply beautiful. The illustration of the faces is truly evocative of the Byzantine icons, with the name of the card written out in tiny letters with only 2 or 3 letters per line in the upper left-hand side. The design of the card back is stunning in its precision, while also being bold and bright with 2 shiny foils. The registration is perfect. This was the first deck of cards to be produced with 2 foils on the same side, or on either side for that matter, and as a proof of concept, it is absolutely stunning. So, aesthetically pleasing? Absolutely. Innovation and technical achievement? Stunning. And context? Like Monet, Lotrek's name is very highly regarded as an artist in his particular field, and as far as scarcity goes, there are only 51 of the Icon's Imperial Reverse decks released into the wild, and they were given as gifts, which makes them almost priceless. Almost, that is, until one goes up for sale, at which point the market weighs in on the going price. In April of 2023, that price is $2,000 and climbing. So now you know what a $1,000 deck of playing cards looks like. No tips for better living today, no profound insights, but rather a peek at something interesting that is outside the realm of day job or school or raising a family or fulfilling any obligations, really, other than to simply tickle a curious mind. And what about you? What do you collect? What tickles your curious mind? Share your thoughts in the comments section below, and please be kind when you engage in the conversation. Be sure to click like if you want to see more videos like this, and subscribe if you'd like to be alerted about them when I post. Thank you for checking out the INRIS Files, and we'll see you again next time.